All right, welcome everyone. As I mentioned before, we're going to take a look at using Excel in order to do some of this number crunching and computational figuring for us. In order to help us out, I have here example 1.3. It's found on, or excuse me, this is a table. Table 1.3 in your textbook. It's found on page 22. And that's what I'm going to use for this. And I've showed you before how you can arrange things so that it can help you view some of this thing. And that is by simply throwing in a data filter. By highlighting, these are going to be these top cells. They're kind of the titles. Like this is countries, and this is the number of dollars spent per person on healthcare. So it's kind of an average. And it's in US dollars, if that matters. But once I put that filter on, I am now able to sort this from smallest to largest and see that Oman with $419 and the United States spends the most on healthcare per person. At least according to this chart, was probably done in like 2010, 2009. So I could go through and find all of that information that I did before, but I want to make use of some of these powerful tools that I have here. So one of the things that's really nice to be able to do, and you can do it by selecting data. A lot of times we have to select data. I could select it like this, or I could even select the entire row. But I'm going to select this data, and before I do that, let me back up one step. Let's talk about filling in some of these things with formulas. There's a lot of formulas in Excel, and there's some shortcuts to doing it, especially as you learn them. But in this section up here, I've got formulas. So I am going to click on a cell, and you're going to notice there's a lot of different types of formulas that are listed here. Some of the formulas are pretty normal. Like I could use this and say I want to find the minimum, and when I put in that formula, it automatically starts guessing like what do you want to find the minimum of. These weird, colored things is the data that I'm selecting. And so while I'm in that formula, I can say I want to find the minimum of that data and then hit enter. And you're going to notice when I click over this in the formula bar, it shows you what the formula was. All of these things are really done, the same way. I'm going to go into this next one and I'm going to hit equals. What did I do? Where am I? Oh, let me get out of there. I forgot to hit enter. So there we go. So I'm going to go into this one below it, and I'm going to hit equals, the equal sign, and I'm going to start typing the letter M. And you're going to notice it shows a whole bunch of formulas just by starting to type. I want to find the maximum. The maximum, and every formula needs to have, after the name, it needs to have these parentheses. And inside the parentheses is where I need to have some stuff. And notice when I start doing this, it tells me I need the number 1, the number 2, the number 3. It basically says you need data. So which data do you want? Again, I'm going to highlight these rows and say I want the max number. These things right here are representing B2, column B, row 2, all the way down to B39, and that's what that is saying, kind of in Excel language. So that's the range that it's going from. So it's telling me the max. Well, I already knew that because I rearranged it. But remember before, we spent a lot of time counting out what is the median. So I want to find the median of these numbers. Again, I start, and I could use the functions over here and hit the insert function and do the same thing, but I recognized it when I started hitting equal, and I was like, oh, I bet it's called median. I'm just going to use that, put an open parentheses. I could select all of this, or I'll type it. I want from B2, notice it highlights it, colon, all the way to B32. Oh, not 32. Let me back that up, 39. And it's really nice. It kind of highlights this is the area that you're talking about. I hit enter and it says the median is 1954. Remember, we would have had to look at this and say, oh, there's 38 things, so I got to find 1954 is going to be, well, wait a second. How is it 1954? Remember when we talked about this before that we always had odd ones. Here is 38. if I break up 38 into, kind of how I would normally think about this, I would have had, well, there's 38 numbers. If I divide that by 2, it goes in evenly. I have 17. 17 on top, 17 on bottom, but because there's no 0.5, there's nothing in between. So what they're having to do is find the 17th number and the 18th number, and we need to average these together. 1911 plus 1997, all divided by 2. That's where they're getting the median from, is 1954. Remember, that helps us when we're taking a look at some of the things when we start graphing this. So there's other functions that you're going to use from time to time. One of the ones that's very commonly used is the average. So I want the average of B2 to B32, 39. And hit enter and it'll give me the average for it. There's lots of things that you can do. There's one in here, if you notice, when you click on this and say I want formulas auto sum, I can just find the sum. What is it if I add all of these numbers together? All kinds of things that you can do, and you can put them wherever you want. So here, this was the min, this was the max, this was the median, this was the average, this was the sum. Other things we'll find a little bit later. But now, if I wanted to graph these things, yeah, it could do that. I'm going to highlight these first 2 columns, and I'm going to insert. And see what they recommend for charts. Remember, we talked about something like this, where this is quantitative data. The categories are not Oman, Kuwait. Those are the individuals. I could have a chart like this, but it's not always really helpful, because this chart, if I can move it and make it bigger. There we go. This chart is showing each individual country and all of the data, and it's like, yeah, that's fine, but that is not the type of graph I want for this. This is a quantitative set of data, so I want to use a histogram. Well, unfortunately, a histogram isn't built in to Microsoft Excel, except for the fact that it kind of is. So what you need to do is you need to go in, and I'm using Excel 2016, which you can get for free through WLC. You might have to talk to the tech department. They can show you how you can download it from your Outlook 365 account or your Office 365. But anyway, I'm going to go into the options and find add-ins. There's an add-in that I already have added. It's called Analysis Tool Pack. For you would want to go down to where it says Manage Excel Add-ins, and you hit Go, and you want to click on the Analysis Tool Pack and hit OK. All right, so now when I go into my Data tab, I have another little thing over here called Data Analysis. All right, and that is the tools that are there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Data Analysis, and I'm going to pick a histogram. And it's going to ask me for an input range. Just like I did before, I'm going to put my cursor in here, and when I highlight, it's going to basically put that range in here. It puts a couple extra symbols in here. These dollar signs lock it into place, but you don't need to worry about that for right now. It's like, there is my input range. A couple of things that I really think are important is that you I always say click on the output range and say I want to put it here. Oops, sorry. Let's see if I can undo that. Yep, Control Z. My output range, click into that little box right there. I want the output range to start right there, and I want there to be a chart. And I'm going to hit OK, and it's basically going to throw in. Here is something that's important for us to recognize, the bins. It's giving me bins from 0 to 419. It's going from 419 to 1301, and that's where they're getting this 12. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 before you get to 1301. So it automatically decided these bins for me. You could decide to make these bins yourself. So if I wanted to do that, if I wanted to make them myself, I could make this histogram look a little different. So in order to do that, I'm gonna do another one right here. I'm gonna take out this junk that I'm not gonna take it out. I'm gonna move it. I'm gonna move this stuff over here. And in fact, I'm gonna delete some of these things. Just get them out of my way. So here's the histogram that they came up with. I'm going to do a histogram, but I'm going to put in bins for me. I want things to be measured by 100. And this means I'm going to have to go through and kind of put these in. Sometimes once you start a pattern, it will recognize the pattern. Let's see if it does that. No. There's all kinds of other formulas I could use in order to do this. Here's a really cool one. I can do equals the cell above me plus 100, and it'll make that 200. So that's a formula. I can grab the bottom corner of this formula and just drag it down and say I want to count by hundreds. So here's the thing though, counting by hundreds is not necessarily a great idea for this one, because you're going to notice this is how many bins I would have. That's what I'm doing here. So I don't want to count by hundreds. That seems kind of ridiculous. They counted by almost 1,000. Let's say I want to count by 500s. So I'm going to start at 500. The next 100 I'm going to say is equal to the cell above it plus 500. Just a quick and dirty way to do that. And then I'm going to drag that down. I'm going to delete some of these. I only need to go up to 5,000, so I don't need all the way up to there. So I need to go up to 6,000, excuse me, because 5,711. So there's my bins. Basically, all I'm doing here is I'm doing data analysis. I'm doing a histogram again. I'm doing the same range, but my bin range, I am going to use these numbers for my bins. I'm going to put the output range right here, and I'm going to chart it. Whoops. There we go. And so now it did this, and notice the difference between theirs. Here were their bins, here are my bins. They're very, it's a human that did this, so they're very readable. But it gives you the same kind of chart. You'll notice the difference when you start doing the bins. It does kind of affect the shape a little bit. One of the things you'll notice in this one is that we do have an outlier way over here. In their chart they had more. I have an outlier way over here. So if I were to ignore that outlier and just kind of look at this data, let's see, grab a red pen. If I ignore the outlier and kind of look at this, I do have almost, again, I've got this kind of strange thing going on up here, but some people would say this is almost symmetric. And I don't know why my things are disappearing, but that's all right. The fact that it's almost symmetric is usually enough. People might ignore that and say this is a pretty symmetric graph. It doesn't really seem skewed one way or the other. So that's how you can use Microsoft Excel in order to do some of those things that we were doing by hand before. So hopefully that'll be really, really helpful as we want to focus, as we move forward, more on the interpretation of the data rather than always how you have to crunch the numbers. That's why we have the software to crunch those numbers for us, but we do want to know what's going on behind the scenes. So that really does wrap up Chapter 1, and we will we'll be moving on then into Chapter 2. I'll probably put together, if needed, some extra videos on some of the specific exercises or examples that were in Chapter 1. But we are going to work in Chapter 2 at describing these distributions. We kind of charted them, we pictured them, now we want to be able to talk about them and describe them accurately. So that's what we're going to be doing in the next section.